God, the chef is very temperamental. Sit down, drink your juice.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Adenike Akinsemolu, the founder of the Green Institute. I want to welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Scott.
All right. Before we get into the Green Institute, which you founded, can you give us a kind of a baseline of Nigeria in terms of, what's this, the current state of affairs in terms of, let's say, pollution, oil and gas, maybe heavy industries, or even the environment?
Yeah, the current state of Nigeria, first of all, Nigeria is an oil producing country. And even though we have all those multinationals coming to the country to we have a lot of multinationals producing oil in the country, there are no really set rules or policies there are policies that are in place, but they are not implemented. So let me give you an example. In the oil producing region of Ondo State where I stay, which is also very close to the Niger Delta area, you have a lot of the effluents from the oil production discharged into the water bodies without any form of treatment. The effects of that, or negative adverse effects of that, is now you have to talk about water pollution. The fishes in the water fishing is like occupation for people that live in the waterine coastal regions. So now the fishes are dying. That would reduce the economic activities in that region. The water that they're taking in that region is that water, some people drink from that water. So at the end of the day, you're obliterating, the livelihoods of people, the water bodies is polluted, the environment is polluted. So there are laws, there are rules, but they're not effectively implemented due to corruption. So in terms of where does Nigeria stand with the SDGs, I would say that we're not where we're supposed to be yet. I feel like in terms of progress, we've not really made lots of progress. And when you do a lot of research, you can see that generally Africa is still lagging behind in terms of SDG progress, because you still have to talk about the basic needs of the people. In terms of basic needs, when you look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs, you're talking about the physiological needs, which is food, water. Majority of the population still don't have access to clean water. And this is due to a lot of heavy pollution going on in the country, or in the continent. But if you're taking Nigeria as an example, it's like nobody cares. Really, a lot of environmental organizations that are trying to raise awareness on these issues, but I feel like that's where it stops, the awareness. But when it comes to the action, to actually mitigating the areas that are polluted, then I don't think we've really had much progress when it comes to environmental pollution. And if you go on the streets of, take Lagos, for example, you go on the streets of Lagos around, was it 2 months ago or last month, we had something we called the flood of waste. So there was flood, and there's lots of piles of waste, just flooded everywhere because there was heavy rainfall. So because people still put their waste and just throw it on the floor. And this leads to pollution, leads to flooding, and all sorts of things. So there are no regulations. Everybody's just doing whatever they like.
All right, so thank you for giving us a kind of a lay of the land in terms of what's happening in Nigeria. So you have issues of like I said, runoffs from the oil and gas industries and other heavy industries right into the water source that is not only affecting the marine life, but also it's the very source that some people use for drinking as well. And then you mentioned sanitation issues as well as just garbage and just lack of, fundamental infrastructure issues. A couple of the things that you mentioned was around the fact that there is maybe growing awareness, but the real issue is the void of enforcement and compliance. And then the other piece that you alluded to was this notion of corruption. So in this kind of backdrop, how is the Green Institute helping to advance the cause of sustainability in Nigeria?
All right, so the Green Institute has created like several tailor-made programs. So our first mandate is to educate, and our education sustainability issues, we're trying to educate for the Nigerian societies. We're not doing it, so we try to tailor our programs for the Nigerian society. So we have a lot of campus-led sustainability programs through the Green Campus Initiative. So we've done a lot of things on various universities inviting sustainability living and green practices. We advocate for sustainable transportation, use of bicycles, for instance, on campuses. We try to encourage students not to dispose their waste, so they should. So we have like waste bins in strategic places on various campuses. So that we also educate them on the need to conserve energy and invest in solar energy. And we also educate students to participate in environmental wellness program that will avert environmental pollution. One of our programs is the Green Ambassadors Program, which is kind of like a mentorship program. And we've trained over 25,000 ambassadors. And the purpose of the program is to build the next generation of sustainability leaders through education, advocacy, and innovation. So another program that we have to curb the problem of waste in the country is a trash to education program. And what that initiative is an incentive-based credit program designed to reduce waste. So pretty much what that is you bring waste to us, reusable waste, like plastics, tires, and students bring them to us and they exchange it for credits. So those credits can be applied to take a course at the institute, or they can use the credits to redeem it for educational materials. So that way we're rewarding sustainable practices and ultimately, increase environmental sustainability efforts. So we're just really educating because we feel like first, people are ignorant of this issue. So for us to before we get into action, we need to first educate the populace about the effects of pollution. Also, we also founded the Green Kids Club because we noticed that working with university students it's a little bit harder because most of them they're already formed in their values and their core values. But young kids that maybe aged 4 to about 10, they still have, you can still train them the way you want them to live. So we formed the Green Kids Club, and it's to provide kids with foundation of green living, and for them to adopt the idea of environmental sustainability throughout their lifetime, and hopefully they can pass it on to the next generations. Also, during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, we were able to expand some of what we do online. So we have nano-degree courses online. Also, we have a program called the Green Room, and we hosted the annual World Environment Day online. We had thousands of people from different environmentalists and sustainability leaders come together to take action for nature. And most of our courses are usually based on the principles of sustainability and then providing real-time solutions to Nigerian problems in Africa at large. So those are some of the programs that we do. We hosted. So when we host people, for instance, for the Green Room, we host people that are professors of that, indigenous professors, as well as international professors. Some of them we hosted like Omoyele Showore, which is, I don't know if you know about him, he's the He's a human rights activist and a very strong environmental activist, and he's the founder of Sahara Reporting. We hosted Jeffrey Sachs, the director of the United Nations Sustainable Development Network. So we usually bring people to mentor students, to talk to them about environmental practices, and hopefully we hope that they can translate that into action in their various communities, and maybe use some of this waste to create wealth, as in terms of students having social businesses. So fundamentally, the Green Institute believes in team spirit. So we've done a lot of collaborations with other organizations to learn from what they're doing, especially in developed context, and see if we can apply some of their solutions to our own environment.
So let's have a bit of a discussion. So just to put it in context, Nigeria is expected to be one of the countries, aside from India and China, that's going to host the super mega cities of the future. What I mean by that is cities that's going to get into the population of 100 million people plus. So the biggest cities of the future are not based in Europe, North America. It's going to be based in Nigeria. It's going to be based in India and China. So that certainly, magnifies the issue, the underlying structural issues that we're having. I do agree with you that awareness and education is certainly one of the prerequisite to action. However, in places of corruption, where people are accustomed to seeing that there's either no regulation or that there's no enforcement, it disincents the individuals to want to participate. So, one perfect example of that is taxes. So in states where you have high degrees of corruption, you're going to have less compliance around taxation, or their willingness to pay taxes properly. So similarly, here climate change and sustainability is one of those things where it really requires a whole collective. And if the right structural, infrastructure, legal framework, if all of these things are not in place, it makes it very difficult, even if you know what you're supposed to do. And of course, there are regions where they're being affected by NIMBY issues, not in my backyard, where some of these pollutants or discharge is coming into their own area. So communities that are living on the water, so homes that are essentially housed above the water, and that is their very it's livelihood, and fishing grounds are really in polluted water. So, but the city above where it's actually discharging from, they don't really care. So you have some major issues. How realistic are we going to be able to actually solve these structural issues? And I think one of the things that I was talking to before you started was the role of government in a corrupt environment. Can the government really make a difference? And should they be the source of the solution?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Government has a lot of role to play, but also, and that's why education is important, and that's why we're working with kids and secondary school students, high school students, and university students, because we feel like they're going to go out to become the future leaders, and collectively as citizens we have a role to play in terms of, from a level of things like just following like green initiatives in our own community, just simple things as putting your waste in the trash, switching off your lights, or not contributing to pollution. That's from an individualized perspective. But however, when you're talking about the structure, there's no way the government has a lot of roles to play. And yes, you're right, the government is corrupt, I would say that. There's nothing, well, a lot of people are advocating, and they keep advocating, but it seems like it's getting worse. So for me, I feel, first, government can provide like credit facilities, or tax breaks for especially social businesses that are following green practices. They can enact like different policies, like that are aid-centric. But the thing though is, how effective is this? Sometimes you hear of stories of World Bank or like a big foundation providing relief funds or funds for social businesses that are green, but we just hear the figures in the news. But when you go to the community, you don't see any change. And it's sad. It's like I don't have the answers to that. Like one of the reasons I'm in Nigeria is, for me, I felt like, oh, one person can make a change in your community. You just have to be the change. You don't have to wait for the government. That's the belief. But when you're trying to make that change and the structure is not in place. In other words, you're telling people don't throw your waste on the floor, but there's no punishment for throwing your waste on the floor. So then people are just like, well, I don't have anything to lose, so I'm just going to keep doing it anyway. There are no like for businesses like big corporations, most of them end up bribing the government. So nobody's just even talking about their emission, or if there's something they have to do at least to compensate for the pollution that they're causing in the environment. So at the end of the day, we still have to say that government has a lot of role to play. But I just want to say that maybe it starts with us as citizens. I think we'll keep at it, we'll keep educating, we'll keep doing the action in our communities. For instance, the reason why we chose the university environment is we feel like it's a kind of a microcosm of the whole country. So we feel like if we can replicate a model in a university community, hopefully those young people will go out to become leaders. And hopefully the leaders that are there now, they would have been so old, and their time will, I don't know. But then another problem with the Nigerian government, the most African governments or Nigerian governments, is that the leadership is passed almost from generation to generation. So even while you're trying to develop people, these green leaders, these change agents, the question is, are they going to be able to get to that position to effect change? And most of our leaders are like 70 something years old, 80-year-olds, and you have young people in their 30s and their 40s that they actually studied. They went to school for environmental studies. They know about this stuff, practical stuff, but they're not getting to where they're supposed to get to. So I feel like teachers have a lot of role to play. If the government is not doing anything, we know what the government should do. We know that infrastructure should be provided. We know that there should be tax incentives for businesses that are green. We know all that, but since we're not following that, maybe we have a lot of role to play as a teacher, like to teach our students, and hope that when they graduate or when they leave the four corners of the school, then they can effect that change.
I'm trying to figure out how to wrap up this interview in such a way that we still walk away with degree of hope that things can become better. And I think when we look at history, and we don't have to look very far, but if you look at the prior industrial revolution, the biggest pollutants, at some point it reached a certain critical point that they themselves realized that they can't even live in their own environment because you can't breathe. And some of the biggest proponents of electrification of fleets and automobile, for instance, are the ones, or still one of the biggest pollutants. The issue that I see is, if Nigeria is on that trajectory and at an exponential rate, it's going to not only cause, incredible harm and detriment to the local citizens, but eventually to the world, because the kind of externalities that gets created there also gets affects the rest of the climate in the world as well. So I think it comes down to ownership, and I think, to your point, there are so many structural things that's outside of everyone's control. I mean, the political power system, like I said, gets passed down from one generation to another generation. And the lack of that democracy, that transparency, how can the individuals and the collective communities at the tribal level, how can they start to exercise, some of the core values that you're discussing? in your book. The other topic that I want to just really briefly cover is there was a question that you posed about how more than 70% of agricultural produce in Africa is cultivated by rural women, but I guess they don't get compensated. Is that what the case is? And how do we actually resolve some of these economic disparities and gender equality issues?
Uh, uh, that's a tough one because like I'm trying to be optimistic. I just like I'm trying to be optimistic, but at the end of the day, if like for women in rural communities, they need like for instance the government can or not me just government businesses, even with their corporate social responsibility, can provide some kind of microfinance loan for these women to start businesses. Um, and for them to develop themselves, and that would increase like regional value chain, and also they can be like informal trade, like there can be some kind of informal education to or some kind of informal trade across borders that would allow women like the food they produce to move across the border without so much rigorous documentation. And of course, educating women generally, these rural women, and offering them alternative will strengthen their economic capacity. But that's an ideal. That's really what we're talking about. Ideal situations. Um, I still believe, in terms of hope, I still believe that we still need to go back to education. People still need the basic needs, and if they have the basic needs, then it will also lead to some kind of attitudinal change towards their environment. So I think for the message of hope, if I kind of understand your question, is that young people, we need to start from the young people because they are tomorrow's leaders. So um, what we need to do is that because we know that these women, young people, they are custodians of the environment because women are usually, especially in traditional African societies, they're usually the one that spend more time with the kids. So they're custodians of the environment. Whatever they teach their kids is what they're gonna even before they go to school. So we need to they need to understand the imminent threat of climate change towards our collective future, and so I think one of the things we need to do, like I don't know, like it's just we need to change the attitudes of people towards the environment, and for us to do that, like it still goes back to what I've said before. You have to start from the child, from when they are young. We have to start from that. We have to be deliberate. So mothers or parents have to let their kids go outside, let them play, let them have fun in nature, let them create, let them innovate, and and maybe by doing that, maybe they would become the change agents. Because I'm trying to be hopeful, but that's like a long term goal. Right now, I don't see the change coming up right now because the poverty level in the country is so high. The gap between the rich and the poor is so high. It's so wide. So if you're telling people to go green, they will tell you, "Oh, I've not even had 3 square meals in a day." Uh, so that is where the problem is. So I don't know. Scott, I really, I don't
Well,
know.
for me, I think that the hope and that message of hope is actually yourself. I think, like I said, there are just so many multivariate constraints that it's outside of many of our control, but yet I think it's a glimmer of hope. It's the individuals like yourselves, it's the think tanks, it's the universities, and I agree absolutely on the mother side because they control not only the resources, both on the economic means to generate, but also the provisioning of goods and services, and the way they actually transfer the value system to the next generation. So I think all these things are right. And I think, when we look at it from a short time period, it's hard to see those changes. But when you look at it from a longitudinal longer time series, you do see the changes and it does make a difference. So I just want to encourage you that you're doing the right thing. I'm very excited. How can people learn more about you and the Green Institute?
They can visit our website by going to www.greeninstitute.ng.
So with that, I've been joined by Dr. Adenike Akinsemolu, who is the founder of the Green Institute. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks, Scott, for having me.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.